Good morning. Happy Friday. It is a beautiful, blessed 66 degrees outside. Let me tell you, I'm happy for it. I wish I was sleeping when it's 66 degrees inside, but that is not the case, and there is no use crying over spilled milk. It's a beautiful day. Let's go and enjoy it. Welcome to Ramblin' While Amblin', James Freeman edition. And it is James Freeman edition because James Freeman doesn't realize when he's being stupid. Let's see if I remember some of the comments. It is early, so... Alright. The first lovely and delightful comment from Mr. James Freeman is that Google has better images of Fort Huachuca than James Freeman could have hoped to get. What James Freeman doesn't understand is that Google submits those photos to the aerial ones anyway. They submit it to probably someone in the administration. I don't think it would be actually directly to the Secretary of Defense or anything like that. It's probably to some paper pushing schmuck in some paper pushing department who goes over the papers or who goes over the photos to make sure that they are not divulging any classified information. So that is a difference between you and Google, Mr. Freeman, is that Google is actually submitting their photos for redaction. The government knows what photos Google has and is using. And Google isn't out there waiting around for the government to try to come slap their pee-pee. Google takes pictures on the ground from a vehicle that drives by. They didn't get as close as you did, I don't believe. They would have driven by. So those are some major differences between you and Google, Mr. Freeman. The next contention that Mr. Freeman makes in error is that he believes that him being arrested, that my stance, that him being arrested for a crime means that he is in violation of his bond, is not quite accurate. No, it doesn't mean... So it's going to go in front of a judge. That's why there's a hearing on your bond. Your attorney is going to make an argument that your bond should not be raised, that you were engaging in protected First Amendment activity, that the charge is weak, that there hasn't been a return from a grand jury on it yet, there's been no true bill, etc., etc. The opposing attorney will make the argument that, well, obviously it's been in front of a magistrate, and the magistrate's determined that there was probable cause for the arrest. Probable cause means that it is likely that you did commit the crime. And so the judge will make a determination. But yes, being arrested for a crime, not convicted for it, is what they are talking about in that statute. Because remember, it takes a long time to get convicted of a crime. While you're waiting to go through the criminal court process and you're bonded out, obviously they're not going to expect you to commit a different crime, go through the entire criminal court process, be found guilty, be incarcerated, or however else punished for that second crime, all while you're still waiting on your first. The system couldn't function that way, James. If you would just take the time, instead of reacting with your passions, to think about what you're talking about, you would very quickly come to the realization that you're essentially talking nonsense. There has been a judicial determination in your arrest that there is probable cause. You need to understand that. It's not like you were just arrested and it's just the policeman thinking it. A judge, presumably a magistrate from Texas, looked at the evidence the police officers presented and determined that there is a good likelihood that you committed the crime. And judges can't ignore that. Society doesn't stand anything to gain by ignoring it. You never want to understand the why. I mean, you make lots of claims that you want to understand the why. Oh, I'm just trying to understand. Oh, I'm just trying to understand. No, James, I don't think you are. I don't think you are. It's a dance that you do to try to show the other side is acting somehow illogically, unreasonably, irrationally. Like with your video on, I didn't actually watch the whole thing. It was too much for me. I lost interest very quickly. But where you're trying to make it so unreasonable that somebody would be arrested over failing to use a turn signal. Well, let's think about this, James. Let's think about this. Why would somebody be arrested for failing to use a turn signal? Could you imagine anything that could possibly complicate matters that would require that person to be arrested rather than just cited and released for failing to use a turn signal? To the best of my knowledge, there are only 3 traffic infractions in Texas that you can't be arrested just for doing: speeding, open container violation, and texting or using like like touching your phone. I don't know. I don't remember exactly how it was worded. It's something like 543.04, something around there of the Texas traffic code. So you can be arrested only for failing to use a turn signal. Now you may notice, James Freeman, that most people aren't. I would say 99.999% of all the people in Texas who are cited for failing to use a turn signal appropriately are arrested. And the one person who gets arrested, that 0.001%, is probably, I'm going to go out on a limb here, probably an asshat. Maybe that person didn't sign the ticket. Or there may have been some other reason, but it's not just random thing. Justice isn't blind. I know. Which leads me to my next James Freeman-ism. Is that, yes, James, there are propaganda pieces saying that the military is protecting our freedoms. And they're not necessarily wrong, but you're misunderstanding the nature of the protection and the nature of the freedoms. Insofar as the military is protecting us from foreign invasion, they are protecting our freedoms. Because other nations don't necessarily place the same kind of values on the First Amendment or on free speech, on the right to keep and bear arms, on the rights against self-incrimination, etc. So in a sense, they are protecting our freedoms by protecting us from invasion. But you have to understand, James, that just because some propaganda piece somewhere mentioned it doesn't make it true. It says on the sides of some police cars to protect and serve, and yet you can understand that that is actually a propaganda piece. That is advertising. That is a method of attempting to alter public perspective, public perceptions of the police. Bombing Syria does fuck all for protecting our freedoms. And yet, there we are doing it, or there we were doing it. There's a difference between propaganda and reality, and there are limitations on meanings. Protecting our freedom doesn't mean that they are actively involved in protecting each and every last one of our individual freedoms against all persons, foreign and domestic, who wish to restrict any of our freedoms. And even if they were, then they'd be in a terrible position because, again, your right to be on my grass conflicts directly with my right to not have you on my grass. Bao's right to play piggy piggy oink oink on our island interferes with my right to the peaceful enjoyment of my property. In your statement about you'd rather 100 guilty men go free than one innocent man be caged is pretty retarded. The original statement, if I remember correctly, I don't know why, but he was really hoping we'd cross over here, and he hasn't pooped yet, so I'm hoping that this is the call of nature, but it's not. Okay. I don't want to go that way. I want to go this way. How about that? The original statement, and I am strongly in support of the original statement, is that I would rather see 10 guilty men go free rather than one man hanged. And the reason why it's important to understand, well, I think the huge distinction is that if you cage someone, you can cage them for a reasonable duration. And by reasonable, I mean what the average person would think is reasonable, not what James Freeman would think is reasonable, because we've already clearly demonstrated that James Freeman isn't reasonable, or at least not reasonable according to what the vast bulk of the country believe is reasonable. However, if you hang an innocent man, it's not an oopsie moment, you can't take it back, it's a tragedy. Which is one of the many reasons that I'm against the death penalty. Because there are no takebacks. Once somebody dies, they're dead. But our legal system wouldn't work if we attempted to adopt James Freeman's approach of rather seeing 100 guilty men go free than one innocent man caged, even if it's a minor caging for a short duration, like where someone is put in a holding cell until they can see a magistrate about their traffic ticket because they were refusing to sign it or something. Who knows? Who knows? The way our legal system has to operate is that the way a legal system has to operate is that suspects need to be somehow, in some manner, restrained until they can their case can be heard. And that restraint may come in the form of a bond. That restraint may come in the form of incarceration. But any way you slice it, you've got to, that's the way it has to be. It's the way it is in every system. Well, at least in every modern system. Anyway, I guess I've rambled enough. Well, at least about that. I'm still amused. Mr. Freeman, instead of saying, you're wrong, here's this case, here's this statute, here's this other thing, he resorts to saying, oh, you're a bad attorney and you don't get paid a lot, and I'll pay off your student debt if you need it, or something along those lines. I'll donate money to pay off your student debt. Well, Mr. Freeman, I paid off my student debt quite some time ago. Thank you very much. I currently am student debt free. I do have a balance on a credit card currently, but that's it. As far as me being a bad attorney, you're basing that on what? Your understanding of the laws? Well, color me unimpressed, James. You are demonstrably uninformed and misinformed on the laws. So you could probably find attorneys who will disagree with me or quibble, but I don't think you're going to find any attorneys who say that I'm out there as far as my understanding of most things generally. Monkey and Johnny 5-0. A lot of people are of the belief that what they were doing with the meter reader, the meter maid, what have you, I assume that it's somehow derogatory. You need to poop? Is this a lean for poop? Maybe? Oh, she's alive and happy. She's just camera shy, by the way. Someone was worried about her. This looks like the dance of the potential poop, maybe? Anyway, meter maid, meter reader. A lot of people are commenting that it was stalking. I don't know if there are multiple. I'd have to look it up. I've dealt with a stalking case. This is off the top of my head, so don't hold me too accountable for what I'm saying here. But if I remember correctly, there has to be a threat with a credible threat. Let me see if I remember this correctly. Has to be a credible threat, and that credible threat actually has to cause fear. I'm trying to remember the cases, because the statute is basically along the lines of you have to make repeated contacts, and you have to make a credible threat of, oh God, I'd have to look it up again. It's been too long. Anyway, yeah, so I don't believe that what Johnny 5-0 and Monkey did could properly be considered stalking in California. A creative prosecutor may be able to go there, but I would seriously doubt it. I don't believe they made any credible threats. But this is probably about 5 a.m. right now of me rambling and walking, so who knows. Yeah, and then harassment. Again, I don't think that what they did arose to a legal charge of harassment. it certainly wasn't, you know, within the bounds of decorum, that's for sure. It certainly wasn't polite. But I don't believe that what they did actually arose to a level of criminality. I could be wrong. There are a lot of laws in California, and I haven't gone through all of them to look to see what potential things that they may theoretically be in violation of. But it is not. I would be impressed if they were actually in violation of a crime there. And of course, Johnny 5-0 never catches a charge, so it would just be monkey in violation, and who knows. Anyway, I guess that's about it for today. I probably had other things to talk about, but unlike James Freeman, I don't keep notes. I also don't live stream it with the intention of reading off people's names to give them that little ego boost. I probably should. Swine, by the way, speaking of needing ego boost, Swine had like 6 or something comments in a row yesterday when I was going through my comments, because I do like to go through my comments to see what people are saying, see if they have any links. Speaking of which, I understand that lots of people have lots of pet ideas that they want talked about. In order for me to really cover it, my basic criteria is I have to find a interesting video, and by interesting I mean interesting to me. It is a very subjective analysis. I have to find it to be an interesting topic, and I have to, in my opinion, believe it's relatable to the community that I'm kind of talking to. So if James Freeman brings up traveling, the right to drive, then it's much more interesting to me than if like Harvey Dent brings it up, because Harvey Dent isn't really in the scope of people that I find fascinating. Yes, there are fascinating things. I do watch, you know, Virgo Triad and Van Balen and Doazic and other sovereign citizen channels, but it's my interest, my passion is still the First Amendment auditing community and the First Amendment and things like that. So it kind of has to relate to them in a way. Anyway, thanks for watching. Have a great day.